Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of DABCC TV. I'm excited about this episode as we have the guys from ThinLaunch Software with us to show us their amazing technology to turn a PC into a thin client. And that's some very neat stuff because as we move into VDI and server-based computing continues to grow, we need solutions like this. So I'm quite excited for them to show it to me and to show it to all you guys. So with no further ado, let's just dive directly into it. So first and foremost, I want to introduce my two guests today. I have two of them. I have Michael Cardinal and Nick Rudnik with us, and these guys are the ThinLaunch guys. So real quickly, can you introduce yourselves and tell us what you do at ThinLaunch? Nick?
Hi, Doug. Hi, everyone. I'm Nick Rudnik, and I manage the development at ThinLaunch, development of the software, that is.
Very cool, very cool. And then Michael?
Yep, Mike Cardinal. I'm the general manager, run the day-to-day operations, and do the majority of the sales work.
Very cool, very cool. Okay, enough about the names and who we are. Now tell us real quickly about ThinLaunch, if you would.
Okay. Well, Doug, we started on this journey about 2 years ago and tried to come up with a way to make it easier for administrators to manage the client endpoint, the desktop that the user sees, the desktop that's presented to the user at the endpoint, whether that be a PC or a thin client. We think we've done a pretty neat job with that, and we're excited to show that to you and your viewers.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we did a podcast with you guys, what, a couple months ago now?
Yeah, I don't remember the exact date, but it's been a few months back where we got into some of the details of the company and what we've done in the past. And today we're looking forward to showing you the actual product in action with a couple of the leading virtualization vendors and their products.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're not going to go in a lot, for those you guys out there listening, we're not going to go into a lot of detail about anything more than let these guys show it off. So if you're interested in learn more about ThinLaunch, definitely go to the show notes of this video and or just go to DABCC.com's DABCC Radio podcast show list archives, and you'll find it in there. But for now, let's get to it. So guys, enough with all the intros and bios and all that stuff. What are you going to show us?
All right, Doug, thanks. This is Mike, and what you should see in front of you is a user desktop. This is typically what a user will see and is presented to them. You may notice that we're using VMware's Workstation product. The only reason we're using this is because we're going to be jumping around and doing some log-offs and restart type functions. Those don't work real well in a hosted meeting, so there's no dependency here on VMware or VMware Workstation at all. It just happens to be the facility that we're using. So if you think of this blue bubbles, as I call it, as the desktop that's presented to a user, this is pretty typical. You'll have the standard user shell from Microsoft with the start button and whatever's been configured, whatever that image looks like that the administrator has put together. You also have icons at the desktop that the user can use locally or use to connect to another application. And what I'll do here, first of all, is I'll just click on a demo ICA connection. And this is pretty typical of what you would see if you were going to connect to an ICA connection and deliver that. It's very easy for the user to close this and move on to something else, perhaps try to get to a social network, private email, click on another icon, play a game, do whatever it is that users do. I'll also show you another possible activity, and this is maybe to connect to the VMware View client and to a virtual desktop. Again, the user can close this, get out of it, and do something else. They may also do something like run a local application. In this case, it's Notepad. Think of any local application, and you can run it locally here, and again, the user has complete control at the user endpoint to do something other than that which is their task at hand. So enter ThinDesktop. And what ThinDesktop is a locally installed application. We use the Microsoft MSI installer technology, and we actually install our software, ThinDesktop, at the local user endpoint or the client user endpoint. That endpoint could be a PC workstation or it could be a thin client. So what I'm going to show you here now is really the crux of what we do. ThinDesktop has already been installed on this PC.
And what does it take to install? Just a simple MSI, just click, 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 done?
It's standard MSI installer technology, and I really didn't want to bore you with next, next, accept, next, next, finish. It really is that straightforward.
Cool.
So I can install the application locally using some way to get the application onto the desktop, a USB key, a CD, whatever it may be, or I can install the application remotely using existing tools and utilities that the administrator has already chosen, knows, and uses on a day-to-day basis.
Cool. Are there any configuration setting? I mean, can you do? Is there an MST that you configure and just have this thing silently brought down, and no configurations necessary, centrally managed? Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Another method of installing it instead of using the interactive installer is just by running MSI exec with the unattended install command, and then there's one simple configuration parameter, and you'll see what that means once we get into the demo here.
Cool. Very cool. Then I'll be quiet and continue to listen.
No, great question, and we're asked that all the time, so that's perfect at this point. Local installation or remote installation, that's entirely up to the administrator. And on the remote side, it's totally up to them what tool or utility or management facility that they use. But here's really the crux of what we do. ThinDesktop is designed to launch and monitor on Windows startup an executable. In this case, I'm first going to show not the ICA connection, but I'm going to show a local application. And what I'm going to show you here is a real simple, straightforward application that just about anybody knows how to use or does use, and that is Notepad. And so I'm going to tell ThinDesktop that I want to install and monitor Notepad. So I've initiated a log off, and what will happen here now is you're going to see a significantly different look and feel to the user interface. You'll notice that the user shell is gone, the start button is gone, all the icons are gone. The user has no access to anything other than that executable, which we've locked down using ThinDesktop.
Oh, very cool.
Now, if I try and quote, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that's neat.
So, as a typical user, I may try and close this. If you'll notice or remember, we said launch and monitor. So not only did we launch this program, but we also monitor it and automatically restart it. So as a user, I have nowhere to go.
Oh,
I
neat.
can do Control-Alt-Delete and log off. And if I try to do that and get to somewhere else, you'll see that ThinDesktop, again, is in control of this device and automatically restarts, regenerates the program.
What you needed to do is open up a notepad that says, "Ha, I'm in control."
Nick, I think you should work on that.
I'll do that next time.
Little Easter eggs.
You kind of get the idea here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm simply going to log off, and I'm going to hold down the Shift key, which is going to present to us the dialog box. And if I have local credentials on this device, I'm going to be able to get my desktop back. Okay, so if I have valid credentials, which I do, I now have my desktop back, the local desktop on this client endpoint, on this client device. And now I'm able to manage this if I choose here locally or remotely. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you a program that's a little bit more useful, at least in our opinion. And instead of being locked down to running that Notepad application locally, okay, so instead of the local application Notepad, I'm going to run the ICA client that we looked at before when the user had to choose that client and say, this is what I want to do. So now you're going to see that significant difference again where the user shell is replaced. There's no access to the local desktop by the user, and we've asked ThinDesktop to launch and monitor the Citrix connection, which it has done. If I try to close this or get out of it, you'll see what happens. ThinDesktop just brings it right back. As a local user, I have nowhere else to go.
Very cool, very cool. Now, in this example that you're showing us right now, we're in the ICA client, so the app receiver, I guess, nowadays. But let's say you're in Word or Internet Explorer, and there's numerous ways you can bust out of those applications. Do you prevent against that? So, for example, like in the Internet Explorer, I could type, C:// and boom, I'm in, the C drive. Does it watch that and catch it?
Actually, no. That is, what we do is we lock down to the specific application that you want ThinDesktop to lock down to. However, there are ways that you can lock down the browser. You can lock down Microsoft Word. You can lock down those applications with simple click boxes that disable those capabilities.
Yeah, GPOs will do it, absolutely.
Or you could do it with GPOs, or you could do it actually right within the application.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, so the important thing to remember is really we're just on a Windows machine where the application that runs is still allowed to do whatever it can do in the context of a user session. And that user session is a user we created on install. And really what happens on startup of the machine then is that user is automatically logged in and the application runs. So if you need to lock down those permissions and security settings a little bit more than default, you can edit the permissions of ThinDesktop user, which is the user we created.
Oh, okay. Is this you had just mentioned that you created that on default upon login? Is this something that's torn down and log out, or is this a consistent user that we have throughout the process? Make sense?
Yeah, the user was actually created at install.
So, Doug, what I'm going to show again here is just so it's a little bit more obvious, is when I went back to that configuration screen, I can do that either locally or remotely, and said, this is what I want ThinDesktop to lock this local device down to do and only do. As the user at that device, I have nowhere to go because ThinDesktop just keeps bringing it back over and over again.
Yeah, so we've just basically, I mean, I hate to say this because it sounds so, duh, but we just turned a PC into a thin client, basically. But yet it still has all the fat functionality under the hood, correct?
Correct. We make no underlying changes to the operating system or to drivers or services or anything else. Now, one of the things that's interesting is administrators now have the choice of using a variety of different images. You can deploy ThinDesktop on an existing image, lock it down to either a local application, or lock it down to the ICA connection or the Zen desktop receiver or the Zen app connection, or you can lock it down to, for example, the VMware View client and only get the delivery of the virtualized desktop. You can use a new image. You can create a golden image and use that as your local desktop. You can use Windows fundamentals. You can do a lot of different things. We don't care. If you want to deploy this quickly and easily, you can use the existing image. All the drivers are there that you need. All the services that are there that you need underlying. That all stays intact.
What else would you like to show us? I mean, is there more to this than that? I mean, seems pretty, and when I say simple, I mean that as a compliment, too. It's just, duh, it just works.
Well, that was one of the design criteria when we put this together, Doug. Let's make it simple. Let's take the complexity out of this thing. Let's make it simple, and let's make it kind of universal. Let's not make it dependent on any specific solution. Let's not make it dependent on any tool or utility or management methodology. We don't care. Because we use standardized technology, the administrator can take their product of choice to manage all this and do it quickly and easily.
Very cool. Very cool.
What I'd like to show you next is a little bit different take. And what I'm going to do this time around is rather than use the ICA client, I am now going to go in and say, all right, well, there's another company out there that does this kind of stuff, and we're going to try using their connection broker, if you will, and see what happens with that. See how quick and easy that is to do. So I've just told ThinDesktop that I've changed my mind. I don't want to use the ICA connection. I want to use the VMware View connection. So that's what I'm going to do.
They migrated. They said, no longer we're going with Citrix. We're doing VMware View from now on.
We've actually run into some mixed environments, which kind of interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. I was just making a joke, but there's a lot of them out there. There's a lot of people that utilize Zen app, right, MetaFrame, but from a VMware View VDI desktop. You know, it's and then you know some people that bigger organizations that have a little bit of everything.
So now I've got the same experience, only it's with VMware View. Again, my desktop, as the user, I have no access to the local shell application, start menu, any of my icons, none of that. Again, if I try and get out of this, again, I've got nowhere to go. ThinDesktop's just going to keep bringing it back. Now, when I've configured this back at the server, I've got 100% control of the virtual desktop image. The administrator does that, has complete control. Kind of the loose cannon, if you will, is at the other end, the client endpoint. That device that the user sits at, whether it's a thin client running XPE or XP Standard, or a PC running XP or Vista or Windows 7 or 2000, the user experience is pretty much identical. And we help change that so that that user device, PC workstation or thin client, acts and looks exactly the same way to the user, because as our customers have said to us many times, the user doesn't care what the box is. It sits behind, underneath, or next to the monitor, keyboard, and mouse, and we don't want them to. And with ThinDesktop, it's that ubiquitous approach, if you will. You can walk up to any screen, put in your username, password, and get your predefined virtual desktop, anybody's flavor, anybody's connection broker. We don't care. And now the administrator's got complete control end to end. One other thing I would like to do quickly, I'd like to throw this over to Nick, because our friends at Citrix have been kind enough to help us set up a full-blown environment with all their brand new stuff.
Oh, cool.
And I'd like to have Nick just give your viewers a quick look at that. You don't have to spend a whole lot of time on it, but I think they'd like to see that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Nick, let's go ahead and flip over to your screen. Sound good?
Okay, so now what I'm going to show you is a little bit different because it involves a couple applications, and on this machine I have ThinDesktop installed, as well as all the latest desktop receiver and ThinDesktop stuff on the back end, all from Citrix. And what I've done on this machine is configured ThinDesktop to launch the desktop receiver, but this time by way of Internet Explorer. You'll see my command is to launch Internet Explorer in kiosk mode and pointing to the start page of my desktop delivery controller, which will figure out which virtual desktop I'm supposed to get.
Oh, very cool.
So, yeah, so it's all the latest stuff from Citrix. Actually, what we're trying to do is turn this machine into a Zen desktop-ready desktop appliance, as they call it. So what you'll see when I log off is the startup behavior now will be Internet Explorer. That's what that flash was. This is the actual page from the desktop delivery controller. So I have to enter my credentials. This will be the login screen. And at that point, the desktop, or the desktop receiver, the client, is going to start up and get me into my virtual machine. So now this machine is a virtual machine running through the whole Zen desktop infrastructure. And again, I'm on the endpoint device here, where about all I can do is use my virtual desktop. There's no access to the local machine.
That's delivered here is based on my credentials, correct?
So those are the credentials I typed in Internet Explorer. As soon as you go to the start page of your delivery controller, it prompts you for the credentials, which are then passed through to your virtual machine. Or actually, to be more correct, the desktop delivery controller figures out, based on those credentials, then which virtual machine you go to and logs you in with those credentials.
So people are watching this, they've seen the demo now, and they've listened to the podcast maybe, or maybe they skipped the podcast, they came to the video, and they're like, wow, this is cool. They want to learn more. What do they need to do? Can they download an eval? What do they do?
Yeah, there's a couple different things they can do, Doug. They can go to our website, download an eval that includes our installation guide and our user guide and the full-blown software with a 30-day eval license on it. Or they can contact us. All the information's on our website, and we'd be happy to run through the full presentation and full demonstration on the maybe the technology of choice, and we can show them the full-blown demonstration on that specific technology of choice, and just see if it makes sense for them and if it's appropriate for what they're trying to do. And we welcome people to visit our website to make those decisions and decide what to do with us next.
Well, perfect. Well, you didn't give the URL. What is it?
It is www.thinlaunch, all one word, .com.
Perfect. So that's www.thinlaunch.com is where you need to go and learn more about the ThinLaunch ThinDesktop solution and download your eval and start playing away. It seems pretty simple, and that's exactly what we want. So, guys, before we call this a DABCC TV episode, is there anything else we need to know or you'd like to talk about?
Well, you didn't ask the question that most people ask, Doug. How much is it? The end-user quantity one is $26. 100 or more, it's $20, and that's on purpose. We wanted to make it real easy to implement and have people use our product, and we wanted to make the financial decision to use this very, very straightforward and very simple.
So, guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And, again, go ahead and visit their website. That's thinlaunch.com. Again, www.thinlaunch.com. And with no further ado, again, I'll just say thank you, guys. Thank you to Nick and Michael here. And we'll just go ahead and call it an episode. Sound good, guys?
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, thanks to everyone.